Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Matt Latter and today we're going to do a post-mortem for Deserts of Kharak. So what does that mean? Basically the post-mortem is supposed to be a kind of review, a look back on the game, a bit of collection of my thoughts on the game. So if this is something that interests you, listen on. If not, well, just skip this video if you want. So for the background I'll be putting some footage up of the game itself from the campaign we played, so you have something to look at as well. So let's start with the first point I've noted down for myself. Basically, first I want to talk about the gameplay itself, the game so to speak. So I'm starting basically with the gameplay itself, that it kind of felt mediocre but sufficient for the game. It wasn't bad, it wasn't really that good either, I feel. I don't know, it's hard to pin down. Maybe this is a mission design in some pieces, but sometimes it just didn't feel really that in-depth, you know? So part of that may be due to the whole unit thing. I've got a couple complaints and thoughts on the units. So I think the basic spread and types of units in the game are actually pretty interesting and fine, and they make for an interesting system, but that system somehow gets used very little. For example, the LAVs. I really like them and they are very key in some of the early missions, but I kind of felt that even by the middle of the campaign they were basically mostly useless. Get a critical mass of railguns and you're set. So I don't know, maybe that was just my playstyle or playing partly on the 2-star mission difficulty, but yeah, it kind of felt the LAVs fell a bit flat. The armored assault vehicles, the AAVs on the other hand, did very well in some respects. They were a good frontline and distraction, but they themselves didn't seem like they did anything outside of 1 or 2 missions where they also were quite important. They kind of felt like being totally ineffective. Offensive-wise, I mean. Obviously they are more intended to be defensive unit, but I don't know, it kind of felt like they were, I don't know, very weak offensive-wise. Which brings me to the next point, which would be the cruisers, which actually, the cruisers are one of the best parts of the game. I really like them. They are massively awesome, and they turn the game on its head essentially. I think that by the last couple missions you can basically just go ahead and build cruisers only. Maybe a couple railguns to back them up, but other than that, a good mix of cruisers and you're essentially set. At least that's what it feels like, you know? So that also brings me to the point that there is quite the imbalance between the light units and the cruisers. So the LAV, AAV and the railguns were all pretty handy and awesome, but they fell massively short of the cruisers. That is obviously largely intended, but especially with the AAVs and the LAVs it felt way too crass of a difference. Like, the railguns were still useful, and maybe even the AAVs a little bit, but in general it felt like build cruisers, build railguns, and you're mostly set. So, yeah. Then again, another point I want to bring up about the gameplay itself is actually the Air Force. So I really liked playing with the Air Force, though it was still buggy with some of the strike fighters not being interested in returning to the carrier properly, just circling around it somehow. And yeah, one of the problems I've had with it is actually sometimes it was too powerful. I felt like you could easily do whole missions with only Air Force. Even the anti-air units were for the most part not that big of a deal, and yeah, that was something I found a bit of a shame. They could have just nerfed them a little bit, I feel, and then forced players to use proper ground offenses a little more. Not exactly sure how that would pan out, it's just a thought I've had that the Air Force is, in my opinion, extremely powerful in this game. So, 2 other points of criticism I'd like to bring up is, one is about the limited zoom. So you may have noticed in the gameplay that I tend to zoom out and then got annoyed and switched to the sensor menu. I mean, they've made such a pretty game, it really looked great, so why not allow us to zoom out properly so we can manage the battlefield properly? It was probably the single biggest annoyance in the game for me, because I'm not a fan of the of playing the game in the sensor array for long times, but I kind of felt like I was forced to do so. I do like that you have it and that you are required to use it from time to time, but I just found it overkill, and the zoom was, in my experience, how I felt it, really, really limited. They should have at least given you maybe double the zoom out capabilities, because this is a strategy game and you need to be aware of your surroundings, and if you're not, you die. And because of the extremely limited zoom out capabilities, I often felt very boxed in. It felt too up and close. So that is probably the single most massive point I'm having here. Another point I'd like to speak of is the resource gathering at the end of the mission. So I've read about Homeworld Remastered that they do it for you now. Basically, when there's still resource on the field by the time the mission ends, essentially the AI says, hey, okay, you have the time, let's just pretend you went ahead and get it all. It seems they didn't do that in Deserts of Kharak, which is bad in two different perspectives. For one, it means you're losing out on a lot of stuff if you go hard for the objectives, which can bite you in the ass later, obviously. Which leads to the second point, that you just need to stretch the missions out. And when you stretch the missions out, obviously the enemy keeps attacking, so it's not even sure if it's a zero-sum game or if you're gaining something, losing something. I think in most situations you would gain something, but again, it's tedium. Why force the player to do it manually? Because I sure as hell know that in some missions we didn't get the resource, otherwise we'd have been still pretty fucking rich by the end of the campaign. So that's another big disappointment, so to speak. Which is not to say I didn't like the game or found it bad. I still enjoyed it greatly, but these are just some criticism points. So that is the first category, the gameplay, done, and I'm switching to the next point. I have noted down the story. So the story itself I found really interesting, and they had a great way of telling the story. I've mentioned it earlier in the actual campaign that I kind of do like this dispassionate way of telling a story. It's a bit strange maybe to explain, but I kind of like how they present things. Also, the characters they introduced, even though they didn't all get that much time on the screen, were kind of interesting. They had somewhat different viewpoints and things to say. Was kind of interesting. So, one of the big problems I've had with the story is, now that I've looked a bit into the Expedition Guide to DLC, they've just left out so much story they could bring in. Like, I understand that they may have wanted to produce perhaps an expansion pack or something, or delve into it in different ways, but the game is rich in lore, and they didn't really capitalize on it. I mean, sure, you know there's the different Kith, the Sedim, the Sajad, the Galtian, and there's actually a whole lot of history to all of these tribes, I'd say, and there's a lot of interesting interaction going on, and I kind of found it a bit underwhelming that they never really got into detail about those things, you know? The Heresy Wars, stuff like that. There's just so much interesting stuff in the history of Kharak that they could kind of bring in at some points. I would have liked that to be more. Which also leads to the point that the Sedim betrayal seems to come out of nowhere, but if you read up on them in the Expedition Guide, it becomes a lot more, well, it's no longer a surprise really to a degree. I think their whole story showcases them as also religious fanatics and maybe a bit crazy, and that in itself could have helped define the Sedim a bit better and give the player a bit more of a grasp. I mean, the betrayal really came out of nowhere in the game, except that the mission before on the end screen they basically nearly told you about it. At least that's how it came across for me. It was quite clearly going to happen something like that, and they could have done that one better, I think. Still, the story is great, it was fun, and I think when we explore the expedition guide together a bit, we'll also gain a bit more insight into it all. So, with the story done, we move through, not through, but to the third part, the look and feel. And this is the category where the game nails it. It's down to a point. The voice acting is really great. The dispassionate type of storytelling just works for me. The music is absolutely splendid and fucking amazing, and it draws you in and it just nails you to the campaign, I feel. The music alone made this game doubly as good as it would be without it. So the aesthetics are also pretty cool and kind of pleasing, and they fit the world and the presentation, and yeah, all in all, I think they've just nailed the look and feel of this game, and I think that's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed it so much. Even though the gameplay itself, as I mentioned, is, in my opinion at least, mostly mediocre and okay, the look and feel is something that can just drag me into a game. A game that not only looks good, but has the feel and the flair, and you feel like you're in there and you just... I don't know how to explain it properly, it's just that flair. A game that has that can drag me in and never let me go. Sometimes it may take a while to take. I mean, I've tried Deserts of Kharak on my own a while back and didn't really like it, but then I've played more than one mission and was hooked. So yeah, it's maybe a bit hard to explain, but yeah, the look and feel nails me to a game, really. So another point I want to mention on that part is actually that I really like the size comparisons they made in the very first mission even. Like, you see Rachel sitting there in the sand, then her runner comes along and the thing is fucking massive. And then she enters the base and is dwarfed by most other things in there, most of all the Capisi itself, which is an amazingly huge thing. And those size comparisons actually did a lot to impress upon me how much of an awesome and great undertaking all of this is. So yeah, that's the look and feel in a nutshell for me. So, in conclusion, I say the game has a good story, a splendid look and feel, the gameplay is slightly lacking, but okay for what it is. I'm not probably going to replay it anytime soon, if at all, but I still love the story and the presentation to bits. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to Homeworld Remastered and Homeworld Remastered 2, which will follow this Let's Play. And on this point, I'd also like to give a small thank you. In this case, I'd like to thank the subreddits of Homeworld and Deserts of Kharak, where I was able to basically do some advertising, so thanks for that. And a particular thanks goes to Rayland AC, who has commented on quite a few of the videos, and has given me some insights and some hints and tips, so thank you very much, mate. It was very highly appreciated, believe me that. So, on that note, I'll be closing out my Post-Mortem with essentially a good game, liked it, not gonna replay it probably. And yeah, thanks for watching, hope you've enjoyed this, and maybe you've had some insights of your own. If you want to share your opinions, feel free, I'd be happy to hear what you think about the game, what you think about how I played it perhaps, and yeah, all that kind of stuff. So, thanks for watching, see you the next time.